Well, hello, friends. It's Sunday afternoon, the last day of November, and it's about 4:15 in the afternoon here in Thailand. A beautiful day. It's quite sunny, but it's overcast, but it's quite bright out. So today, we're going to talk about several things. The number one thing that we'll talk about is what is referred to as a right speech. Now, right speech is different than right noble speech, and so we'll talk about them both. Right speech is ordinary, and right noble speech is noble. And that right speech is actually part of the precepts, but the precepts themselves is rules that are given to Thai children, something like, but different than, the Ten Commandments. The reason that they're different is because when they're given correctly, there is no, let us say, hell to pay. In other words, if you break the precepts, you're not going to go to hell. Rather, if you break the precepts, you'll make a hell for yourself out of it. So, where did these precepts come from? These precepts actually post-date the Buddha probably 200 years or so. And that the Buddha actually used the precepts as an example of right noble behavior, right noble action. So, if the mind is noble, if the mind is free, then we have no reason to have anything other than right noble speech. Now let's define what right noble speech is that it's the avoidance of wrong speech. It's the avoidance. In other words, it's a negative kind of thing. So let's define what is wrong speech and clear all of that out so that we can be left with what would be said by one who has a noble mind. So the first one, and in fact the one that needs to be discussed the most, is a deliberate lie, saying something that's not true and said in a way that expected the people to believe it. The second one would be harsh speech. That would be calling people names, using loud, angry language, etc., like that. In fact, harsh speech is very closely akin to telling a deliberate lie. And then the third one is malicious gossip. Now, Mr. A can talk to Mr. B about Mr. C in a wholesome way. But if Mr. A talks to Mr. B in the sense of wanting Mr. B to become enemies with Mr. C, then that's malicious gossip. And often also it has deliberate lies associated with it. So there's a difference between benign gossip, or maybe even wholesome gossip, as opposed to malicious and unwholesome gossip. So we can talk about another person, but if you talk in a derogatory manner about that person, it's better to not say anything at all. Just like an example of that is that it's not a good idea to talk about your average Joe Blow Western Dhamma teacher, because I'm most likely to start getting into some malicious language because I know more than I should. And so let's not talk about them. And so we can have that kind of idea. It's better to not talk about another person unless we're doing it in a, to say, compassionate way. Now, the fourth kind of language would be frivolous language. Now, there's realms of frivolous language, but in the time of the Buddha would be the example of it is when the monks start talking about, and here's a clear example of which king is better. Is King Pasenadi better than King Bimbisara? Who has the most chariots? Who has the bigger army? Who has the most gold? That kind of talk would be frivolous. In our world, talking about politics would be frivolous. And so we don't talk about politics at all because it's not a subject that has anything to do with Dhamma. Now, there is a story that's in the Lotus Sutra, which is a Mahayana text, and that Lotus Sutra has a story about a man, a father, who sees that his house is on fire, and he goes into the house and tells the children that they have to leave the house, that it's dangerous because it's on fire. And the children do not listen to him. They do not pay any attention to him because they're playing a game or something like that. And so he tells them, oh, look outside. There are some carts and chariots out there, and I want you to go look at them. And then the children will get up and go outside to see the chariots, where the real intention was to get the kids out of the house. Now, we can see that as an analogy of trying to help a person to be able to get out of their dukkha, to get away from dangerous things. And they don't. And so the story here is to lie to the kids, to tell them that they can go see a chariot or maybe an ox cart that's outside. Now, this is a Mahayana text, and the idea is that we can talk about this as skillful means because we get the kids out of the burning house, and that's the goal. But within the actual teaching of the Buddha, we got to look at that a little bit more clearly. Now, the first thing is that we have to look at this is just a story. This did not actually happen. And this is one of the qualities of the teaching of the Buddha is that we use a lot of stories, a lot of analogies. In fact, already today, before we turn the video on, I used several stories, several analogies about swimming and whatnot. So if we can make sure that we understand that we're telling a story to make a Dhamma point, then in that regard, it's not a direct lie, because the direct lie wants the audience to believe the story is true. That's like the Christians taking the Bible literally rather than seeing it as a story that has some good points to it, a moral to the story. As an aside point, we can say in the Christian Bible, there is in the book of Genesis the story of Adam and Eve. Now, Christians really love this story because it's got a talking snake. It also, the talking snakes talked Eve into eating some fruit, and then she gave that fruit to Adam, which now allows all the patriarchs to blame women for all the problems of the world because they take the story literally. To where the real story is that there is no fruit, not something that grows on a plant, but really the word fruit is used in the sense of a result. We use that in Pali a lot. The noble path has the fruit of the path. We also use it in the sense of the fruit of the vine It would be real fruit, but the fruit of the labor would be not fruit. So what Adam and Eve ate was a fruit, which meant the results of their actions. And what were their actions? They began to, while in paradise, start looking at what they like and what they don't like, calling some of it good and some of it evil. And when you start talking about paradise being evil here and evil there, what kind of paradise is that? So they say in the Bible that God threw them out of the Garden of Eden. Guess what? They destroyed the place in their own minds mentally. They didn't have to take a step to get out of the garden. They had already taken that step mentally. And so when we understand the story that way, we didn't have to have an actual Adam and an actual Eve or an actual snake talking or otherwise, or even a real paradise. All we need is to understand that this is a story that talks about making judgments, and that the person who makes judgments destroys his own paradise by finding fault with things. So, back now to the story of the man who had his house on fire trying to get the kids out. If we're taking this as a literal, then perhaps the way to say it is that, okay, I'm going to grab the kids that are so young that I can pick them up and carry them out, and let the kids that are too big and too heavy to carry to figure out that the house is on fire all by themselves. But that's also a literal way of looking at it. And that we can say then that the Buddha actually would have done that. In other words, if we can't get the kids to see that the house is on fire, if they cannot see that in fact what they're doing is dangerous, then we can tell them a story. We can tell them, oh, if you'll go out of the house that's on fire, there will be something nice and delightful for you. Now, that's generally not the way that we teach the Dhamma, but rather the better thing to do is to be able to help the people see that they're creating their own disaster. If the person can see that they're creating their own disaster, then they'll have a better chance of getting out of it, rather than lying to them and telling them, oh, well, why don't you go to the temple? Because why don't you go to the temple is actually giving the job to the people at the temple rather than dealing with the issue right here, right now. But the point about right noble speech is that where it actually is introduced is not as a precept. Like I said, the precepts, they come hundreds of years, but where did this come from? It comes from Sutta number 117, where the Buddha talks about that when the mind is noble, which means by that is when the mind is unified, when the mind is free from the unwholesome, when the mind is joyous, then we do not have any value or any reason to tell a lie, for instance, to protect ourselves, because our behavior is already pure enough that we're not embarrassed by our own behavior, that our behavior is good enough. Also, that when we have a mind that's noble, we don't go into malicious gossip, because let those people out there be. Let Mr. C be Mr. C. We don't have to convince Mr. B to hate Mr. C. If Mr. B wants to go make friends with Mr. C, that's okay, not a problem. So this is what we mean by that. The point is that right noble speech has to do with the state of mind that one is in. Now there's another story that I have that might help you with this, and that is the story of a There's some sort of technical word for it. I don't know what the technical word is, but it's a kind of a rabbi. And this rabbi has the job of using a knife to, in a way, and that way is called kosher, to kill an animal like a sheep, to prepare the animal for food. And it's a special way of killing the animal. I'm not skilled in that. But here's the point. The kosher man, the rabbi, goes out with his special knife to kill a goat. And then the goat looks him in the eye, and he sees the goat, and he sees that what he's about to do is wrong. And so he, in that moment, puts down that knife and does not kill the goat. What that actually is meaning is that he can see for himself that he is about to cause harm and suffering to the goat. So he stops. He became noble in that moment. Now, if the goat really got to him, if the goat got his goat for good, then he would put down that knife and not kill any more goats. He would retire from that profession because he can see that killing is wrong and leaves that job to other uh, rabbis to do the job. That he's not going to do it anymore because he now has compassion for goats. He's not going to kill them anymore. Okay, so we can use that as an analogy for all of our speech, that we're not going to harm people with our language anymore. That in fact, that's the point of compassion, is to give people what would be valuable, useful, and wholesome to them rather than harming them. So this is what we actually mean then by right noble speech. It's not that we're just following the rules, but rather we're following wisdom. So that's the difference between precepts, where you find the precepts of non-killing, the precept of uh, abstaining from sexual misconduct, from taking things that are not belonging to you, etc., like that. These are precepts that we give beginners and we give children, but there is a problem with that. And that is that the children and the beginners will make that into some rule. And then they will cause problems because it's a rule now. I remember an example of that is that I was once several years ago on Koh Phangan at a resort where the family dog of the people on the resort was absolutely covered with ticks. And so while I was there talking to some friends in the open air eating place, and I would pick the ticks off and put them on the ground. And that dog, I haven't seen any other dogs do it, but that dog really loved those ticks. And so he would eat the ticks. I would pick the ticks off and put them down, and the dog would pick them up and eat them. Well, there was a Westerner who had gotten really Hinduized. He was saying, "Don't feed the dogs to the ticks to the dog." I'm not feeding the dog. I'm just putting ticks down. Everything that the dog is doing is up to the dog. And he's saying, "Oh, well, I mean, you're sending the dog to hell, and because of that, you're going to go to hell too." That's a little overboard, you know. The precepts that the Buddha was talking about was killing in general, but let's say that size has an issue. If you take that all the way past the end point, you'll say, "Oh, I'm sick, I've got bacterial infection, but I can't take any medicine because the medicine will kill the bacteria infection, and therefore that's killing, isn't it?" Well, it is to a Hindu, But to a Theravada Buddhist, no, it's taking care of business. You take the medicine so that you can feel better, and that your intention is not to kill the bacteria. Your intention is to have good health. So my intention was to not kill ticks. My intention is to relieve the suffering of the ticks on the dog. What the dog did with the ticks was up to the dog. But this Hindu guy, he got really upset. In other words, he was the only one who went to hell. He was the only one. Dog didn't go to hell. Dog was enjoying your lunch. I didn't go to hell. I thought this was funny. So
I want to ask you
you
something.
can see then that all of that has to do with what's going on in the mind. So if your mind is to harm someone with your speech, then that's not noble speech. If your speech is designed to um, uh, let us be helpful, or to help someone understand the noble Dhamma, then that's not harmful speech. That's noble speech. It depends upon one's intention, even if they didn't get it. So, in that story, you could say then, well, the Buddha would say, in order to get those kids out of the house, we have to tell them something to get them out of the house. But there's no point in lying to them directly. We could go and show the kids, look, the house is on fire. If you can see for yourself that the house is on fire, you will get out of it. Doesn't that make sense? Christina, doesn't it make sense to you that if you can show somebody that their house is on fire, their hair is on fire, their mind is on fire, that would be up to them to be able to get out of it? Is that not true?
Yeah, it makes sense. You try to keep
So
the
there's no
harmony when
reason.
you show them that, though. When you say it,
Pardon?
you try to
I'm
like keep
sorry,
the
go ahead.
harmony. No, I said like you try to keep the harmony when you say it, though. When I say things, I try to.
Well, disharmony is a kind of fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dhammarato, I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
So then you say it would be correct to look this right speech instead of looking at the rule as a precept. You can see if speaking somewhere is making your mind disharmony, breaking your samadhi,
Mm-hmm.
and based on that, what kind of speech will be helpful for the samadhi for your mind and other people's mind. That's the right speech, and what breaks it is a wrong speech.
Well, it's actually a difficult point. Here, let me go off in this direction for a moment. In the suttas, and most especially in Sutta number 61, in the Rahulavagga Sutta, the Buddha was talking to his own son, and the story is that the boy, still a young man, went out in the afternoon time when the stores were open, and he went into a shop, and some other monks saw him going into the shop, and so when he came out, the monks told the Buddha, and the Buddha questioned him about it, and Rahula lied to the Buddha. He says, "Oh no, I didn't go into a store." Now, that would have been pretty stupid. I mean, if the Buddha asked you directly, did you go into a store, he probably already has the information. And so the kid was pretty dumb to lie to his dad. But in this sutta, the Buddha uses the example of his bowl that has already been finished lunch, but all that was left in the bowl now is the end of the meal, the scraps. And so the Buddha took the scraps and showed Rahula and says, someone who will tell a direct lie, all they are is just scraps in a bowl. And then the Buddha added water to the scraps and swirled it around, making a vile mixture of it, and showed that to Rahula and says, anyone who would tell a lie is like this. And then he dumped the bowl out so that there was only the residue left in the bowl. And the Buddha showed Rahula that and says that someone who would tell a direct lie is nothing but an empty bowl with a bit of scrap in it. And then he said something that I really remember very well, and that is that if anyone who will tell a direct lie is capable of doing any wrong behavior. If you will lie directly, then you will cheat. If you lie directly, you will steal. If you lie directly, you will kill, depending upon the circumstances. So this is an important point that the Buddha made about telling direct lies. So I would invite each one of you to be on guard to not tell direct lies. Because if you'll tell a direct lie, that means that you'll do anything. You've got no moral character at all if you tell a direct lie. But how about if you just don't say anything? If you don't say anything, then that's not a direct lie. In fact, noble silence is a whole lot better than ignoble speech. And so it's better to keep your mouth shut, to not answer the questions, maybe even to change the topic. So this is Giannis asked this question. Giannis, did I answer your question well enough for you? About what is right noble speech is that it's the speech that does not harm anyone intentionally.
Yes, I understand it.
Okay. Now, it is possible that you can have what you would consider on your own, that the speech that I have was not harmful, it was direct, it was not a lie, and yet it was not well received. So the Buddha would say that, yes, that happens sometimes, but if our intention is that our speech, in fact, is best if it is direct, not a lie, and is well timed so that it is wholesome, beneficial, and well received. That's the ideal. But we can't always get that ideal. Sometimes we'll have a wholesome, beneficial speech, but it's not well received. That happened to the Buddha. I mean, in fact, you could go so far as to say that that was ultimately the destruction of the teaching of the Buddha in India, was because his teaching was not well received, even though it was wholesome and beneficial and timely, correct. And yet that's no guarantee that it's going to be well received. And that's an important point also, that you can, as Rumi said, in launching an arrow, once the arrow leaves the bow, you're not responsible for that arrow. The arrow is going to go where the arrow is going to go. That in fact, that's Zen and the art of archery that they actually count on. I've actually seen it's more of a tournament or a demonstration, not a competition. But the Zen bowman will take all great precision. Every little movement that he makes has been skillfully practiced over and over and over again. But once he lets that arrow fly, he's not even interested in where the arrow lands. In fact, the correct procedure is as soon as the arrow is shot, you don't stand there and watch does it hit the target or not. No, you continue with the exercise, which means you put the bow away, turn, and walk away. And so this is how we have to do our own speech. We make sure that it's correct, that it's timely, it's to the point, but it is not our job to make sure that it's well received. I think Ivan and I have had conversations on that point. Do you have anything to say about that, Ivan?
Not much. It was just laughing. It's yeah. It's everything you say is makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
But what happens, though, is the bowman becomes more and more skilled through his practice, so that the arrows do find their way to the target on a higher frequency because of the practice of the bowman, but not when the arrow is in the air. But it has to be practiced so that the form, the procedure, is operated correctly. So, this is the point about right noble speech, is that it is timely. And this is an issue about especially those who are just getting into the Noble Dhamma, that when we're talking to ordinary people, we may not have the skill to give them the correct answer to their questions. And because we don't have the correct answer, and correct means that they really get it, that we don't have the skill yet to be both timely and beneficial, then it's better to not try to teach the Dhamma, to hold off on that. Then, in fact, the best way of teaching the Dhamma is by your own behavior. Let them see. In other words, you're not interested in how your arrows hit them. You're much more concerned with, like the bowman, the Zen archer, is the form that you take. When your behavior is exemplary, when you act correctly, you're not interested in whether they hear you or not, because you don't have any control over that. That you only have the control over delivering the arrow out of the bow, not delivering the arrow where it strikes. That's up to the arrow, that's up to the target. But that we can practice and practice knowing how to speak, so that when we do speak correctly, then the arrow will land on the target. And basically, the only arrow that I'm interested in hitting the target is to talk to the students to get them to practice. When the students are practicing on a regular basis, over and over and over again, practicing wholesome thoughts, only then is my delivered arrow hitting the target. I can talk beautiful Dhamma and get anybody all interested and enthusiastic about it, but if they don't start practice, I've missed the target. Does that make sense, Catherine?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, we can't control the world. We can't make everything the way we want it to, and it would be dangerous if we could. But we can control our reactions and we can control our intentions, and that's what we focus on.
All right. So, how about you, Alex? What do you have to say? Alec. I don't see him. So, how about you, Khalib? What do you have to say?
Yeah, it's been very good, and thank you. And I'm gonna start paying more attention to what not to say.
Yes. And the best way is when the mind is noble. When your own mind is not noble, there's not much that can be said that's going to be wholesome. In other words, when somebody wants to argue with you, if your mind is noble, you don't argue with them. You let them have their way or whatever, or you can call them out on their argument. But when the mind is not noble, we'll argue with them. So the best thing to do before we speak is to check your own mind. When your mind is noble, when you're free from hindrances, when the mind is fit for work, then it's fit for speech. So, Karwan, what do you have to say?
Dhammarato, can you hear me? Dhammarato, this topic I found actually one of the most difficult part of Dhamma, to be honest. I
Yes,
don't
it
know
is.
any.
Keep your mouth shut
I
is the hardest thing that there is to do, especially for women. Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
no, but also, but woman, and then my reaction back to them, and I don't know.
That was a
I
joke,
just
by
found
the
it
way. I didn't mean it.
for me, to be honest, more and more I'm thinking when I'm dealing with some people, it is better for me to lie. It is more in maybe in their benefit for me to lie. I don't know anyone in my life that us honest and truth telling us I am, and I get it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. I'm getting so much hate for it. In every conversation that I have with whomever, even last night, someone cry because of me telling truth. And so the more and more I'm finding, maybe I'm also, even right now, I'm a little bit angry, and I think even Buddha, in a way, he was a liar. I mean, he has said things in suttas that are not true. So he was, in a way, we could say he was just lying to people to not tell the full truth. So yeah, I have really difficulty with this. How can I truly say what I think without hurting the others? Because I do hurt other people. So for me, it's either just not talk. I can just decide to just shut my mouth and talk, or because when I
Yeah.
do talk,
Okay.
I get hurt.
All right. So what you're actually answering your own question in the sense that it's better to say nothing at all, and perhaps with nothing more than a or I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying. I hear you, but that you don't tell them the truth because you're in Phuket. Is that correct?
Yes.
You're in Phuket. Is that correct? Okay. Who do you think in Phuket wants to hear the truth?
Nobody.
Nobody wants to
Yeah.
hear the
No,
truth. No, they want to party down and they want to be, let us say, in a position of getting their way. Now that you know that they're not interested in the truth, you can happily not have to tell them the truth. But
but I
don't
do
lie
get
to
in
them.
situations.
Don't lie.
I don't lie, but I do get in situations that I cannot talk. Let's say right now I'm talking with someone, a lady that I a little bit have some contact with, so I cannot avoid not talk to her. So either I will just be what she wants me to be and just say whatever she wants to hear, or I will just speak the truth and she will cry. So I cannot have like a normal relationship with people.
Well, let us hope that you can, in fact, start dealing with people that you can have a relationship with, that you do. In other words, you keep going back and setting your hand in the fire. And when you do set your hand in the fire, you want to try to put the fire out rather than removing your hand from the fire. And so I would recommend taking your hand out of the fire rather than trying to put the fire out.
Yeah.
And so you can say, well, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, and just leave it at that. I hear you. You don't even have to say that you disagree with them, because that's inviting an argument. But you can admit, you can acknowledge, because you do understand, that's telling them the truth. The truth is that you do understand what they're saying. I hear you.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I know that it's a very tempting thing to say something after that. So that's the time to be quiet, is to say, I understand what you're saying, but then that you also begin to understand how, let us say, in a habit, it's a habit that we have formed of talking. We want to defend ourselves. We want to hold our positions. We want to give them our opinion as if our opinion is worth something. That would be something that you could say. Also, I hear what you're saying. I understand your opinion. I don't want to give you my opinion because I know my opinion is not worth anything either.
Yeah, I need just talk, not so much. I talk too much. Yeah.
Isn't that true about everybody? We all talk too much. Mr. Ben, what do you have to say? How about you, Paul? What do you got to say?
I was wondering if you could talk about knife language and balloon language. I remember listening to it in a call earlier.
All right. We can. This is, let us say that this is a skill that can be developed to where you can give language that is, let us say, not harsh, that it is pleasing, that it is beneficial, and that it is true, and that it doesn't start arguments. It's possible to do that, but that takes high level of skill. You would become a diplomat. That in fact, Russia would want to hire you if you could do that. So that what you say is pleasing, is wholesome, it's beneficial, it's not argumentative, and it's true. But that's real high levels of skill that nobody here has. And that the Buddha himself was not perfect at it, because he did make enemies also. And so the criteria would be, first, don't tell a direct lie. Kawan, the first order in this system is you don't tell a direct lie. Number two, it's got to be wholesome and beneficial and well-timed. But wholesome, beneficial, and well-timed is secondary. The first and primary point is that we don't tell a direct lie. And so when somebody tells you a direct lie, instead of arguing with them, you can say something like, that's interesting. Or I haven't heard it said like that before. But you don't have to tell them, hey, man, you're directly wrong. You're so wrong, you're going to go to hell for that one. No, don't say that. That's harsh.
Dhammarato, would you also say joy or speaking from a place of joy is also important because these Dhamma talks are
That's
quite
the
joyful.
best. That's absolutely the best. If you can say it with great joy, then that takes most of the sting out of it. So treat people with joy, which means you bring the skill of joy, which means you practice the skill of joy. Because joy is a skill to be developed. Sukha, being satisfied, joyful, and happy, is a skill very few people have. Now, you would think that, there's so many comedians on the stage, they must be joyful. And I really appreciate George Carlin, but he was not a happy man. I also like the Three Stooges, but they were actually violent with each other. I also like Bob Hope, but he had a pretty tragic life. So being a comedian does not make one happy. So we're not talking about developing the skill of being a comedian. We're talking about developing the skill of being joyful with other people. Because joy wipes off, just like anger wipes off. It rubs off. If you go around angry, you're only going to be around angry people. Why? Because you walk in, they become angry. But if you're a joyful person, then when you walk in, you got a whole bunch of joyful people. It rubs off. In fact, there's a word for it. It's called mudita, sympathetic joy. If you run across a joyful person, saddle up beside him and get that joy. Otherwise, the joy is up to you. And when you get the joy, spread it around. That's spreading the Dhamma, is being joyful. So, sheep, if you can be joyful with your mother, great, but you can't. So stay away from her.
That's tough. Dhammarato.
Let's see who we got out. Hey, Tom. Tom, do you have something to say?
Um, Hi, Dhammarato. Thanks a lot for the teaching. Yeah, I think it just got me thinking about nowadays as well, because of technology, we have people with diverse opinions mixing online more than they ever used to. And so everybody is trying to win debates. And there's this YouTube channel where you have like one socialist in a room full of 20 far right, extremists. And the whole point of it is to try to win an argument, win a debate. And it's so counterproductive. It just creates anger. And if only there was a bit more wisdom of the Buddha, and even if only these people themselves were to lead with joy, then we would actually make some progress. But everybody's so obsessed with trying to win a debate, win an argument with their speech, and I think we all get sucked into that as well. So I think it's that's what it got me thinking of, and I'm gonna try and reduce how much I get sucked into that myself, whether that be through YouTube or whatever it might be. Just trying to show some wise restraint on that. But anyway, thanks for the teaching.
All right. You've reminded me of something that's germane here, and that is there is two kinds of knowledge. Actual knowledge that you know is true, and then there is belief or opinion that we really, really want to be true, but we don't have the evidence. All right. Two people who are arguing are both in the position of they want it to be true, they want to be right, but someone who absolutely knows for sure, he's not going to argue with them. because he already knows. Why argue with someone who doesn't want? And in fact, that's the point about an argument, is that both people always go away from the argument disappointed and unhappy because they could not convince the other person. But nobody wants to be convinced. When you go to an argument, you don't want to get an argument where they're going to convince you. You want to go into the argument to win, because that reinforces. I learned this one long time ago, and the example is that someone goes into a bar. Perhaps he is a reporter or a businessman seeking business information, and talks to the bartender, but does not order a drink. The barfly's there. They invite him. You've got a drink. They want you to drink. If you don't drink with them, if you don't have a drink with them, they get unhappy and upset. Why is that? It's because deep down inside, they have the idea that, well, maybe drinking in a bar is not a good idea. But if everybody in the bar is drinking, then they agree with me, and therefore I'm safe. But if you go into a bar and people in the bar are not drinking, then you being the drinker, you're not safe. Now, you can take that right onto the internet, and whatever ideas the person has. Let's say that they've got right-wing viewpoints. They want other people to have the right-wing viewpoints because that establishes their view, because they don't really know. Nobody knows what politics should be. There's no such thing as a good government. They're all bad. But if you say, oh, my government is good, and somebody disagrees, now I want to argue with them to try to convince them so that they'll believe what I believe, and I'll feel better. And nobody ever feels better with an argument. So you're right about that. Don't argue with people, especially right-wingers. But don't argue with left-wingers either. In fact, don't argue with anybody that doesn't have a full set of wings. So, let's see who's next. Che. Welcome, girl. Glad to see you. Do you have something to say about right speech today? Never mind. How about you, Ben? Are you back on?
Trey said she cannot speak.
What was that?
Oh, no, I was just saying Trey said she cannot speak. Yeah.
Okay. So, Ben, are you there?
Yes, I was riding the scooter. Thank you for the talk, Dhammarato. Yeah, right speeches. Right.
So, does anybody else have anything to say? Something right, something noble.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy. That'll do it. Okay, Mikey, why don't you take this thing home?
Happily. Thanks for the splendid speech today, Dhammarato and friends. So yeah, glad to see so many friends here today. If you're watching this on YouTube, come join us. Come join us on the Dhamma Friends Discord. There's a link in the YouTube video description. And yeah, y'all are welcome to stay on the call, keep hanging out in this here Hangout channel. And yeah, you guys can come and hang out anytime. I'm also inviting people to fill out a time and a date when you can do a one-on-one call. If you'd like to do a one-on-one call with a seasoned practitioner, that makes it really easy for us to set something up.
Yeah, that's on the channel.
Yes, yeah, there's a one-on-one channel, yes. And also check out the OpenSanghaFoundation.org for things like our Sangha map and other resources as well. Yeah, just take care, take it easy. Yeah, don't worry about a thing. There's no need to stress. There's no need to say that thing that you've been wanting to say. Just take it easy instead. All right, friends. So yeah,
Well,
y'all are
thank you
welcome
all
to stay
for
on.
coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dhammarato.
All right, so everybody stay online and enjoy your own company with each other. Discuss what we've talked about today or whatever you would like to talk about, and I'll leave you guys to have some Sangha time together. So, ta-ta for now.
Thanks, Dhammarato.
See you, Dhammarato.
Thank you.